Good morning again. It's the third hour of the show, 11 minutes past 9 a.m. And we are into our last topic of the show, our last topical discussion of the show, and it does come in at 9 a.m. Well, and with this discussion, we're going to be having deep conversations to do with the national budget, trade and investment in the country. And joining me on set this early morning is Brenda Kankunda, who is trade investment policy analyst at CIT Uganda. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me here on the show.
All right, many thanks for joining us today, and pleasure is ours to have you in the morning. So our discussion mainly is we want to first of all look at the fact that we are preparing for the national budget, and I believe this is one of those busiest times for CIT Uganda and other civil society organizations when we are at this time of the year. So breaking it down a little is that we are prepared for the 48 trillion budget as the country, but there are bigger questions. We are facing a very huge economic crisis in the country, and it's very worrying, though we wouldn't want to admit that it is, but in a situation whereby some people cannot afford certain essentials shows you how worrying the economy is. So my first question would be, can we meet our target of getting these finances for the budget to meet up to the budget?
Thank you so much, Jerome, for that question. For me, I think that, and this relates to, for instance, what we've seen finance and URA do. We see that for this financial year, they're not introducing new taxes, but rather concentrating more on issues to do with efficiency and compliance. I think that the target can be met if we are maybe being compliant when it comes to remitting our taxes. And I think that is where the challenge usually starts from. But also looking at the fact that this comes in at a time when we're trying to recover from the COVID-19 effects. I think that there are quite a lot of challenges, and this has actually been seen everywhere. We've also seen the escalating commodity prices. So the economy is struggling, and that definitely means that chances are so high that even being able to meet that target is going to be quite difficult. And what we see, or what our worry is that this may actually lead us into continued borrowing. Like we are already struggling, a line we've already taken, which is quite detrimental for our nation, because the repercussions that come with borrowing are quite so high. For instance, if you look at, and this is not just even a Ugandan problem, but if you look at most of the African states, Uganda inclusive, you realize that they spend about 30% of their budget on debt servicing, not even debt repayment, but rather debt servicing, which shows you that as an economy that is already grappling and struggling, if we still continue to borrow so that we can be able to meet our targets, then we shall continue struggling, and there will be no way that we can be able to bridge that gap that is affecting our economy, or to bridge that economic crisis that is happening at the moment.
Okay. And now let's as well look at, are there any chances, if you were to look at that, I believe we have some sectors where we can pull some of these funds or some of these resources. When you look closely, where are chances of at least saying that we can raise these finances if we are to follow maybe these sectors, if we are to closely monitor these sectors?
Actually, one of the things that I've personally realized is that when it comes to budgeting, when you, for instance, look at how much is allocated to the different sectors, it shows you where our priorities as a nation are. At the moment when we say COVID has really hit us, we should be seeing maybe the health sector topping the list, or being the priority. But still you realize that other sectors or programs are still prioritized. And that even makes it difficult for me to, assume that maybe we can be able to, get certain funds from the different sectors, because we have oftentimes showed where our priorities are as a nation, and we tend to ignore those sectors that are very key or fundamental, especially when it comes to the economic recovery. and for us to be able to get out of this economic crisis that we are in. So it is not something that I personally would really think that some of those sectors would come out to, contribute, because I think we've made it aligned that those are our priorities as a nation, and we have ignored those which are really key and fundamental to us.
Okay, and also borrowing. I believe we're going to borrow. That I'm seeing it coming. But do you believe it is right for us to borrow at this level of the economy? Or should I even ask? Do you believe that we are in a worrying state?
Well, of course we are in a worrying state, yet borrowing, in a sense of borrowing, is something that is quite inevitable. We know that even some of the most developed countries are borrowing.
True.
But I think where the issue comes in is whether the borrowing or the amount of money that we borrow, whether those dates are prudent enough. Because I think that is the major challenge that we face. There are instances where we've seen the country borrowing and they're not even utilizing the funds that are borrowed. Yet they have to incur a lot of interest in that particular amount. So I think there is need to rethink even our borrowing strategies and look at, if say we are in a state where we must seek for aid, how prudent is that aid that we are seeking, so that we are not just bringing in huge sums of amounts and then we have to suffer with servicing those particular debts, which is quite high and unsustainable, especially for the economy.
Okay. Now, as sitting in Uganda, I do believe you've been you're policymakers who at least follow up on some of these situations. Now, with the borrowing that the government has been doing and all that, even the loans that maybe we've been acquiring from maybe international donors, when you look at the situation, have you made any follow-up on situations to see that at least this money has been put into use? And most probably, maybe let's talk about money that is borrowed internally.
There are a lot of issues that relate to even the money that is borrowed internally. And actually, we've also realized that whereas we say the economy is struggling, some of the challenges go down to borrowing internally. Like we've seen, for instance, if say government is borrowing from a bank within Uganda, definitely there is that assurance that they will be able to pay back. So when you look at maybe the small business enterprises that would want to maybe borrow from the same financial institutions, it becomes difficult because of that gap, that a lot of money is being given to the nation, to the government, and then there's also that assurance that they have, so meaning that chances are so high that they will not actually borrow to these other small or micro enterprises. But also, coming back to your question on following up the money, that is something that Siatini has really done. And for us, even broadly looking at it from a sense of where that money is taken, where do we see, we've seen, for instance, government signing promissory notes to projects like the Rwanda project, which we have, made a lot of noise about. And when we follow up and try to say that, can we at least see like an audit being carried out for these particular funds, government is committing. We have realized that in most instances, even the audit itself is not there, and those funds are not used for the actual reason that they should be used. And that is why I told you that as a repercussion, we just see us, first of all, increasing our indebtedness, but also spending a lot, especially when it comes to our budget, committing a lot of resources from our budget just to service the debts that we have. And which means the other sectors cannot be able to receive maybe as much as they should have received, because we're already cutting off a huge chunk of the budget to service the debts that we have in place.
Okay, and of course, for you who is still joining us here, we're just looking at some of the key possibilities of us raising finances for the next financial budget, or for the next national cake that is going to be presented to us on the 14th day of June 2022. Big questions there, as most probably I want to bring in Madama Kankunda again. I need to understand. You see, the permanent secretary said that this is a pro-people budget. How true is that statement?
Well, for me, I think when you talk about per people, yes, and even when you just look at the theme of our budget, looking at the fact that it talks about commercial agriculture. For me, when I talk about people, in my understanding is to touch base to the last person on the ground, maybe at the parish level or at the cell, village cell. And when you talk about commercial agriculture, you are literally pushing away someone that belongs to that small sector, someone that doesn't even own an acre of land, because when you talk about, say, commercial agriculture, you're talking about practicing agriculture on a large scale, meaning that those who do not have that particular, piece of land cannot be able to practice or to be part or to be included in what we define as commercial agriculture. So I think those are some of the questions that, would there and here pose questions of whether this is pro people or really pro one-sided people. And I think that is something that is quite debatable, but I feel that government has made an effort, and all we need to do is make sure that even for the few strategies, because honestly we've seen government coming up to, put structures in place and see how best they can make it pro people. So I think the best way that can be attained is if we just go beyond maybe what is broadly seen, but see how we can best make sure that this budget, for instance, is inclusive to the last person that is at the parish level. And even the strategies, or maybe the funds that are allocated to the different programs, maybe if it is the parish development model, make sure that this is not just a structure that is there, but it is rather benefiting those that it is intended to benefit, the intended beneficiaries. That is how we can be able to justify whether this is a pro people or it is not, it is against the people. So,
okay, all right. And well, there is also, he mentioned something to do with the parish development model, because he was saying this time around money is going to go to places it has never gone to. And when he mentioned something like that, I believe we all know issues to do with the implementation of policies here is that certain times when money is allocated, certain people don't receive funds. I do believe at least Siatini was following up on some of the Myoga funds, different recovery packages last year. What were some of those challenges that most people did highlight, saying why there is limited access to these funds that the government allocates?
Well, I think broadly, what has affected, especially these economic stimulus packages, is an issue to do with the inequality. The fact that even when we see the funds out there, there is a lot of inequality when it comes to distribution of those particular funds. But they're also not, and that's exactly what I was telling you, they are not reaching the intended beneficiaries. We are seeing like a tail of people that come out and they know that government has put this in place, and they come out and want to, scrape away from those before it reaches even those that it is intended to reach. And that is one of the major challenges that we face. Because these are very good strategies. When you look at like the Myoga fund, when you look at the parish development model, all these are very good strategies that if they were well implemented, then I would see at least a bit of significance for them. But also it goes back to the implementation strategy. For instance, if you put in place the parish development model, how best have you prepared, say, the parish chiefs, who are maybe the administrative body in terms of this PDM, how best have you prepared them? Are they in a position, because like we've always seen, really I would want to assume that whenever it comes to maybe elections, we've not, put in high qualifications for who can stand as a parish chief. So how best have we come out to, prepare them so that they can ably administer this parish development model? But also, what are the structures that you've put in place? We know there are different pillars of the parish development model, and we see that a lot of focus is being put on the financing pillar. But the question that still triggers us is that does this mere cash handout solve the existing challenges that we've had at those parish levels? Challenges to do with employment, challenges to do with the fact that almost a lot of people are living below the poverty line. There are high levels of poverty. I think that if you gave this person 10 million, it is going to solve those existing challenges. But also, lastly, is we've had structures that have been in place. We know maybe structures ranging from, like we see, we have commercial officers, we have district production officers, and we have structures being put in place. Can we instead look at how best we can turn them around so that we make them better? For instance, farmers will tell you that whereas we do like when it comes to agriculture, we have the produce, we plant, we harvest, but the challenge comes in with the storage, or how best we handle our produce or our products. So can we look at maybe, instead of concentrating on the financial pillar, because I know there's also a pillar on production and storage, can we see, like, for instance, each parish having like a post-harvest handling facility, so that at least you are assured that all the people in the parish can be able to benefit from it? Because for me, I personally think that some of these structures or strategies that they put in place just come for a short time, and they're not sustainable because we don't put strong structures in place that can sustain them.
All right. And of course, we're going to take a break after. Brenda is going to return now. I believe the next discussion, we're going to be talking trade and investment. And Sheila, you're going to be giving us details to do with which investment opportunities are there for us to seek for economic recovery as a country, and then looking at an overview of Uganda's trade. So that and more is what we are going to be having in our last quick 15 minutes after the break, as we discuss both the trade and investment opportunities that are going to be available for Uganda in the next financial year and how we can utilize them. Stick around. Good morning.